Thomas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. This episode of Ancient Secrets Revealed is entitled "The World is Not as We Have Been Led to Believe." Before we get started, always little things come up, and I'd like to start sharing them in the beginning of the podcasts. One of them that's really cool is this James Webb Telescope. I don't know if you guys know about that or not. Adrian and Scott, have you heard about that? The James Webb Telescope?
No.
Yeah, it's
the Hubble sequel.
Yeah, it's going to probably I think they're planning on having it go up in December if it doesn't get delayed again, and it's going to be like an upgraded Hubble. And what it's doing is there are different kind of telescopes, radio telescopes. There's, of course, light telescopes, which are what we're most familiar with. There's infrared telescopes, which is what the James Webb Telescope is. So it's going to be picking up primarily the lower vibrations. I mean, it'll get it at all, but emphasis is it's infrared is what it is. And so here's what they're thinking. It's really cool. According to the Big Bang Theory, the universe is expanding. And they're saying, and there's reasons for this, it goes back to Hilbert and Einstein and all that, but to try to say it succinctly, the further out the universe expands, the faster it's moving. It just picks up speed. So what they want to do is see, and basically because it takes time for light to travel, right? So they want to see further and further back in time. And so they're going to be looking at now galaxies that are much further away than even the Hubble could perceive. And you guys know, I'll explain it again, but there's this thing called the Doppler Effect. And that's, when a car's coming at you, and then when it passes, and the sound, and so what is that? Well, if the car's coming at you at a certain velocity, it's getting closer to you. Now, sound is a frequency, but if it's getting closer to you at a fast rate, then the frequency goes up. Especially if it's accelerating, like that. But then when it's going away from you, each wave, in other words, when it's coming at you, if it's a wave, let's say it's beep, 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 like that. When it's coming at you, because it's coming fast, it's going to go beep, 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 beep. Then when it's going away, each additional beep has further to travel, so it hits you a little later. So the frequency of the time those beeps hit you goes down. Beep, 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 it's a wave. So beep, 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 like that. And so when you have something far away that's been traveling at faster and faster speeds away, the frequency goes down. That's why they're noticing that a lot of these galaxies, but they can't really see them very well, and they're out of focus and stuff. But the ones that are really far away are predominantly red. Why? Lower frequency. Red is a lower frequency, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, like that. So what they did then is they created this telescope, and they're going to be putting it up that focuses on the red, infrared, and they're going to then be able to see galaxies that are super far away. Now that's assuming that and assuming the Big Bang Theory is correct, then what they're going to do is they're going to be able to see just how old those galaxies are. But what the problem could be is that they could realize that the galaxies are older, much older than what the Big Bang Theory says they should be. And that's going to throw a real monkey wrench into the Big Bang Theory. They have, as I've said in previous podcasts, seen a galaxy that's older, but they kind of ignored it. Just one galaxy, it was out of focus. But there are other theories that explain that can explain why there's this red shift, it's called. And so it could turn out that it could really turn the Big Bang Theory up on over its head. And there could be other reasons for the red shift, electromagnetic interactions of space, of particles with the photons in space. It slows them down. So the further they travel, the more they get slowed down because there's more interaction like that. We'll see what happens, but it's an incredibly exciting time, you know. Was that good enough?
Sorry, when you asked the question about this, you had just gone silent on my end for some reason, so I couldn't hear what you were saying until I just came back on. But I read about that last night. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's interesting too, Michael, because as I've been poking around, the internet, it seems like there are more scientists who are saying what, I actually heard you saying for 20 years is, when something doesn't fit into their theory, when they find a galaxy that's much older than they thought the universe was, they just set it aside. And there are scientists that are now starting to acknowledge that and saying, we just need to let go of the old paradigms. Just let them go, see what the data says, and move forward, or else we're going to be stuck basically in the Stone Ages. So it's been really fascinating to find these
there's a really funny
who are
progression. Yeah, there's a really funny progression there about the first they ignore it, and then they say, well, it's not true, and then they say, well, okay, it is true, but we've always known it. But at any rate, we'll see what happens. It's going to be a really fascinating time.
Fascinating.
My opinion is that the Big Bang Theory is going to get compromised, at least in some forms. You see, in Vedic knowledge, manifestation of existence, that self-interacting dynamic, and I explain this in detail in my classes, but it happens kind of virtually from perspective of relativity, which is we live in relativity. And so these ideas of unification and simultaneity and infinite correlation and all that, it's all valid, but the physics of it, the phenomenology of it is occurring pre-space-time, and that's hard to comprehend and wrap our heads around because, well, how can there be something pre if there's no time? That's for another lecture. That's for a whole lecture. I do it in my classes, but we'd spend more than just a podcast time to really get into that. So let's go on to next. Bill Maher. Adrian actually sent me a little video of him, some new rule. You can look it up on YouTube if you wanted to watch it. 7 minutes long. It's called, starts with new rule, Bill Maher, YouTube it, you'd find it. But it was interesting because he was talking about the vaccines and, what else, Adrian?
Wasn't vaccinating school children?
All that kind of stuff,
I believe.
Yeah.
And
then the thing about facts, he was saying that they're ignoring the facts.
He was saying that, well, and it was really interesting because he kind of, talked about what he felt like were distortions with the conservative point of view and the liberal point of view regarding vaccinations and COVID and all of that kind of thing. And I found it really interesting. He said, first of all, 90% of our news is negative. I thought that was so interesting in the United States, whereas around the world, they mix in good news with the negative news, but ours is just all negative news.
Because that's what gets the press. That's what gets
gets people to turn on the TV. They're afraid, so they turn on the TV. And then he quoted a percentage I thought was shocking, actually. 70% of Democrats thought that 50% of people who got COVID were hospitalized. And
it's actually like one or 5% or something. Yeah.
It's 1 to 5%. And so they had greatly, and I'm just kind of quoting him here, greatly exaggerated view of the dangers of COVID-2 and the mortality rate of children. And then he quotes the idea that states, that still have their schools closed down are all blue states. And so I just found it
more children
fascinating because
more children die of the flu every year than of COVID.
For sure. Yeah. And so I just thought it was really fascinating because, you know, I kind of consider, I don't know, liberals as people, especially around this topic, who have done a lot of research and, you know, really gone to town on the ideology of everything. And I was shocked to see that maybe not. Maybe they're just being fueled by the things that they're hearing on the news or in other places, and they're not checking out the details. So
Yeah, the thing that
I was
really
kind of
struck me,
shocked.
the thing that really struck me about it though was he said, I think, a lot of great stuff. And then he said one
He did.
thing,
It's interesting.
and I think this is an important point. He said one thing that I really thought was off. And, you know, I caught myself kind of, that's what stuck in my mind. And I kind of was, if I wasn't careful, I was going to project that on everything he said. And then I realized that, you know, I do these podcasts, I do my lectures, and I'm sure that people have the same kind of response to me. If I say one little thing and it hits around, not have been what I meant, might have just been what they thought I meant. But whatever it is, it can really color the whole thing. So I thought that was a good lesson for me, at least, you know.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good reminder for us, for you to say that out loud too, because, you know, there's going to be some people, because I quoted that, they're going to throw out everything, at least I might say, and maybe what you say, because I'm talking to you. Yeah, if it doesn't fit into our worldview comfortably, we toss it, you know?
Yeah, and then out goes the baby
Well,
with the bathwater.
Yeah, well,
baby with
I
the
don't know
bathwater.
if I think the lesson's more for the listeners to hear, and all of, you know, for all of us, you know, to understand that even though just one thing might be wrong, you know, you can't throw it all out.
Do you know, on to the next subject here, homeschooling has doubled in size since the pandemic started. I thought that was just standalone interesting statistic, you know.
Yeah, I
anything
think
else?
people started pretty early on pulling their kids out of school.
Yeah, because
You
of the
know,
masks and making them wear masks. And
mask.
now,
I think, you know,
what were you
even
saying,
just not
Scotty,
knowing
about?
what COVID was at the beginning, you know.
Yeah, and getting vaccinated now, they're requiring some children to
Yeah.
be vaccinated. How old?
Oh,
5 and up is coming up in like October
In California?
here
In LA?
or I don't know if it's
5 and up.
probably is California wide, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But and then look at the statistics of what's happening with the kids too, you know, in terms of how is COVID affecting young children, you know, and is it the time to mandate it now, or is it, you know, let this play out? I mean, it's not like there's any giant hurry, because I don't think the statistics are that your kids they're not dropping like flies from COVID, you know.
We'll see what happens. Anyway, let's go on, because there's a lot we want to get to here. I've been watching the U.S. Open tennis. It's been the most exciting. I've been watching tennis. I used to play, but I've been watching tennis for, gosh, a long time. And McEnroe, Borg, and all that I used to love. But this has been, I think, the greatest Grand Slam tournament I've seen, most exciting for me personally, at any rate. But I love the interview. Some of these, I love the reflectiveness of some of these tennis players. And I love to see how people who really excel in a sport, even their perspectives, even their philosophical perspectives and things, I think are sometimes just really great. But there was one thing Djokovic said, Novak Djokovic, who's playing this afternoon, and if he wins, he's the first guy to win the Grand Slam all in 1 year since 1969 or something. But this is an interesting quote, and it kind of put me off a little bit in a way, but it made me think too. He said, the bigger the challenge, the more glory in overcoming it. And the word glory I got stuck on, because I guess, you know, I've talked in the past about IPGACO, identity, preconceived notions, association, I get it syndrome, you know, all those things. But I realized I have issues around the word glory. I think I associate it with the Roman Empire and generals and how it was glorious to go kill a bunch of people or something. So glory is a word that, I don't know, to me, it sort of feeds the petty ego or something. And it gave me reason for pause, and I'm still thinking about that. What do you guys think about the word glory? You guys have glory? Does it have a negative connotation?
It's interesting. Glory, coming from my background, I was raised with the Christian religious background. So glory is always, for me, connected to like the glory of God, something that's amazing, awesome. So for me, it's kind of a positive connotation.
Yeah, but when it's associated with an individual seeking glory or attaining glory.
Well, yeah, in that
it
sense.
feels funny to me. I don't know, but at the same time, I'm not judging it. I'm learning from it. I mean, they hear that quote. But again, let's go on, because here's a really great quote of Djokovic. He said, I know, and this isn't word for word, but it's close. I know that if I can win the inner battle, I will then win the outer battle. And that one just gives me goosebumps. I mean, that's something we can take, all of us. Look how we view the world. It's all an outer battle, And if something doesn't work out, there's blame. It's all about the battle on the outside. And if something does work out, it's because we overcame that's which lies outside. But how many of us really work with, and if you want to use the word fight, and fight that inner battle?
Well, Michael, too, you think it's even more poignant when you think of that the woman tennis player that is having such a battle right now mentally. Remember, she had to, I think she backed out of the tournament or something.
Raducanu. Yeah, she actually won the women's championship, and that's an interesting story. Yeah, she had like a panic attack. She couldn't even play past the fourth round at Wimbledon, and then she came back. It was the first qualifier. She had to qualify with winning the qualifying tournament before she could even get into the U.S. Open. First time a qualifier's ever won the whole thing, and she did. And that brings up the next thing, that she played against Leylah Fernandez. And this is really more about transference than anything, because I just adored Leylah Fernandez. She's 18. She just turned 19 a few days ago. And she's just this young little kid, and just cute as a button, I think. She's half Filipino and half Ecuadorian, I guess, and Ecuadorian. And such a little fighter, And the thing is, I realized I was transferring. She kind of looks like my daughter, especially when she smiles. She has this big, bright smile. And I had transference with her that this, like my daughter was out there playing. And I've had favorites before, and I've cheered for them and been disappointed if they lost, but it's never been like this. I mean, I can't even watch the replay now. She lost in the final. And but the point is, there's this whole principle of transference going on. A lot of people don't even know what transference is. And even if they did, they don't believe they would ever be in transference. A lot of people, they even know what transference is something that they kind of think other people do, but they don't. But transference for all of us is real. And it colors our relationship with life and with people, if we know it or not. And that's why, your relationship with your father tends to be how you transfer your relationship with men in general. Psychology 101. The relationship with your mother, that's how you relate with the females in general. And it's transferential. It doesn't mean across the board, but there's that predisposition for certain individuals that you find yourself in relationship with. But it just really, God, it drove home for me the power of transference, and how, I mean, I teared up. I really did. It was unbelievable for me, So now I think what we can do, let's see if there's some other little points here.
Michael, do you think that you know, in today's age, it's like, you know, I
Yeah.
think about that with some of these other, that Simone Biles, the gymnastics people, the girl that she bowed out of the Olympics and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
She was unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
it seems like so much now people are letting, they've got the equation upside down. Whatever's happening on the outside is affecting the inside, instead of coming from the place of inside. And you know, then you can, it's, I guess that's the having the boat in the water versus the water in the boat
Yeah.
thing. You know, maybe you could
Well,
talk
it's all about that.
yeah
That's the Djokovic quote. You win the inner game. If he said, I know if I can win the inner war, the inner game, then I'll win the outer game. And when you watch him play, you can see that. I mean, it's all about getting his head right and not losing his balance, and in between sets or whatever, closing his eyes and going inward and just getting his head right. It's an inner war. It's an inner game. Life. It's an inner game. And the way it works now is so much of what we try to do. And you see people trying to play the angles, get your foot in the door, or win the lotto, or whatever. It's all about the outer game. The inner game it's not even played, you know? Yeah. So let's there, well, I'm jumping around here a little bit. This quote I don't want to pass over here. Real world wars, the real war that's going on in the world today, and the wars that are being fought, they're no longer wars with bombs and weaponry. Not really. That's not the real war. The real wars are being fought by like thieves in the night. It's all going on behind the scenes. And even like what's going on, with the Red Chinese and how they're trying to infiltrate the United States, or trying to now overtake Afghanistan because it's got all the precious rare earths and all that stuff. And how infiltrating educational institutions. There's a huge war going on in the world, not just with the Red Chinese, but it's the way wars are conducted now. And it's like thieves in the night conducting what's really going on in the background. And that's one level deeper than what we see on the surface, what we see in the news. But today, what I want to talk about is even at a level deeper than that. And what really triggered it, you guys send in emails and questions and things like that. I read them all, and I appreciate them all, and feel free. But I got one that inspired me enough that I want to really base the rest of the podcast on this. And here's what she said. She said, the level of corruption is so deep and intense. My thoughts are that this corruption has always been there underneath the surface, and now it is out there for all to see. Do you think that is how the golden age comes in? Because of the awareness we can no longer turn a blind eye to? My concern is that so many seem to remain oblivious by choice. If I wanted to, I could just respond by saying, yeah, that's right, I agree with that, and now with all the social media and news and so much more knowledge available to us in this computer generation than was available back when there were only 3 TV stations, and you had to go to the library to look up anything, now it's just a click away. So in one way, I could just simply say, yeah, I agree with that. People are becoming more aware, and as people become more aware, things are going to change. I think that increased awareness also creates a lot of confusion, a lot of pressures. The perfection of computers, we almost kind of like this gymnast that Scotty was referring to. I think we start to expect that kind of thing from ourselves. It just puts too much. We don't know how to handle it all now. It's almost, I think I said this once in a previous podcast, it's almost like if we did get computer technology from the aliens, they should have honored the prime directive because I don't think we're ready to handle it really, and we're learning how to deal with all that. The trolls on the internet, for example, it's just one of many examples. But here's the thing: that yes, it's true. People are going to become more aware, and so we're going to start to work things out. But there's a whole deeper level here. And it's deeper even than the thieves in the night that are conducting and pulling all the puppet strings from behind the scenes. And it's a little tough to explain. It's a deep knowledge, and you may choose to reject it. I think even if I can convey it so that it can be understood, it might be something, oh yeah, that's cool, I get it, but it's still another thing to live in accord with it, And that is that there's an underlying basis to life. It's like the root of life. And living in harmony with that is the determining factor. If the group consciousness, if humanity lives in harmony with that underlying basis, that foundation, then, and this might be a stretch, and I've used extreme examples just to really profoundly and emphatically underscore the stretch, and that is that the possibilities are so huge and vast in contrast to how we may start to think. The Republicans think that this is the only way the economy is going to be okay. This is the only way that, capitalism is the only way. Then you got the extreme liberals that, oh no, socialism is the only way, and we need to print more money. And then you got the communists, and then you've got the libertarians and the anarchists, and everybody has these different theories. And then just to really stretch your boundaries to the point where I hope I don't tear them. But imagine a world, and we're just imagining here, where there was really, truly a great enlightened leader, somebody with the wisdom beyond Solomon. And he was good and caring and loving and wanted to take care of the world. Now we can say, well, wait a minute, absolute power corrupts, absolutely, blah, blah. Okay, fine. I'm just saying imagine. Imagine that. Then wouldn't it make sense if we had somebody like that we just allowed him to rule, make up the laws himself? That's hard to even for me to say it. It's hard to say it. And I can see so many problems with it. But the point being, there's a huge range far beyond what we can even conceive of as possibilities that could still uphold natural law, still uphold people, still feed life, still support abundance and happiness for everybody. Here's another extreme, just to push your buttons a little bit, just to try to open things up. Slavery is a horrible thing. But in a way, and I lived in a monastery. I lived in an ashram for 9 years. And it was no democracy. If I was told out of the blue, pack up your bags, I want you to be in India in 24 hours, boom. I took all my stuff, shoved it in a closet, kissed it goodbye because I never knew if I'd even see it again, and I was gone. And anything, when to work, when to eat, what to do. I was all regulated, and I just did it. And I could have left anytime I wanted. It wasn't like I was imprisoned or anything. But other than that, somebody could argue that's like slavery, but it was best years of my life, really. Certainly some of the best years of my life. And so it's not really about anything other than the level of the group consciousness. If the level of the group consciousness is there and healthy, then there can be all sorts of different forms of government. And so when we take a step back and say, well, what's right, then it's really more about what's right for now. What do we need for the current group consciousness to be regulated and managed as best as it can be, considering the nature of people now? You know, there's a principle that says that the consciousness of the leader is a mirror image, it's a reflection of what's going on in the country as a whole. What you elect is what you get because it's what you are. And so as the consciousness evolves, then we get more and more enlightened leadership. And we can only imagine in a truly golden age what the form of government will be. Now, Star Trek creates an interesting ideal, doesn't it? Well, there's no money in Star Trek, right? They even said that if you're a Trekkie at all, you know that. And I forget the different parameters, but it's a very different economic world. It's a very different world. And I think it's one that seems to be consistent with ice cream cone in the sky ideals that we were like, kind of like the John Lennon Imagine song, you know, oh, well, why can't we just do this? Well, if nothing else, right now, the group consciousness won't uphold it. And then there's also the principle of, what do they call that? The, not economies of scale. What is it called? This idea that things are owned publicly, they don't work. And they give examples like parks in New York where there are needles all over the ground and people defecating just wherever, and they're public parks. But then somebody buys the park from the city or whatever and starts to manage it, and it becomes beautiful. And then we talk about, the American Indians. The American Indians had no ownership. Well, that's not really true. They had their little plots where they would grow their crops, and that was theirs. And it worked. And so that was an ownership kind of a thing. Also, the idea of land management. When if there's a forest and somebody goes in and they don't own the forest, they go and they just cut down all the trees and take all the wood. Whereas if it's their forest, then they manage it carefully and let some trees grow so that there's, there's always some trees there, and they don't just strip the land bare, The point being then that in one sense, the question I could just answer yes. I think that's going to happen. People are going to wake up, they're going to see what's going on, and they're going to say enough is enough, and that's got to stop. But if the group consciousness doesn't evolve, if the group consciousness doesn't change, things aren't going to get better. What really changes it, and this is the point, what really determines the health of a culture, the health of a society, is the degree to which people are living in harmony with natural law. And it's from that the right form of government, the right set of laws get created. Now, the whole purpose of Mount Soma then is to feed that, is to evolve that. And there's technologies for that. They're ancient technologies given to us by ancient seers. And there are technologies from the ancient times that we have no idea about. But because we don't understand them, and because there seems to be a cultural arrogance that exists throughout eternity, we can't accept that the ancient Egyptians had a technology of how to build those pyramids that we don't know. So we come up with these preposterous theories of how they did it that couldn't possibly work, And it's the same thing. There is an ancient technology whereby we can purify the consciousness, evolve the consciousness so that people live more in harmony with natural law. And that is called a unified field technology. Now, it's like the deepest level of existence. Our notion of unified field technologies now are what? I mean, they're barbaric. It's atomic bomb, but modern physics is far more advanced than that, but they don't even begin to understand the technology of it. And but the technology is there. It's a Vedic technology. And by feeding that, then we're going to get more and more evolved forms of government. We're going to get more and more evolved leaders. And all we can do now is our best based on the current level of consciousness. That's it. So I think we need to be careful not to put too much of an absolute value on our current perspective. And that's if you're ultra liberal, if you're ultra conservative, if you're ultra whatever. There is a best form of government that's out there for now. Am I making sense, you guys?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Scott,
And actually, that Bill Maher thing, I didn't kind of get to one of his bottom lines that I actually really liked is that, we don't want to make decisions that are purely politicized, and that's kind of what's happening with our psyches now is people are in two camps, and, they're even making medical decisions for individuals based on political, he was saying, not medical fact or anything else, the way it's politicized.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's that psyche that you're talking about. What kind of government are we functioning under?
And who knows where those political perspectives come from? Are they truly a political perspective based on affinity for a political group, or is it a result of an infiltration of this invisible behind the scenes thieves in the night that are kind of really managing and infiltrating and convincing groups to move in a certain direction and think a certain way? Now,
well, we even talked about our own inner oblivion, right? We don't really want to know, and so we stay oblivious instead of researching, finding out, and thinking for ourselves and whatever.
Yeah, how many people
just
really
get
want
swayed?
How many people want to take a deeper look? A lot of people's approach to the news is to ignore it. I just don't want to go there. I don't want to think about it. It's too depressing.
Right.
Now here's what it really boils down to in another sense. That's the whole concept of free will versus predetermination. And I think it's important to understand that basically predetermination is just karma. It's cause and effect. It's like if you got a bunch of billiard balls and you roll them on a pool table, a billiard table, and you knew the elasticity of the cushions, the friction of the felt, the spin on the ball, the velocity of the ball, you could calculate where every ball is going to end up. It's just pure math. It's just predetermined. Once those balls are in motion, if you had a big enough computer, you could calculate out where they're going to go. This universe, the predetermined perspective on it is that this is just a great big billiard table. And so everything is predetermined. And there's a truth to that. It's called karma. But there's another component to it. It's also could be called God's will, you see. But there's another component to it. God's will comes in two forms. And the other form is free will. Heisenberg kind of touched on it with the uncertainty principle. It can be affected. The observer can affect where something emerges in space. They use the example of an electron. An electron isn't a ball. It's not a billiard ball. It's not a ball in space. It's a probability cloud. In other words, it's like a mathematical function. Probably, if you grabbed onto that electron, you'd find it somewhere in here. But there's a possibility, because it's a cloud that disperses out as you go further away from the locale. It's a possibility that it would show up over here. There's another possibility to show up way out there. But probably you're going to find it somewhere in here. And that's a function of the observer. And the more the observers live in harmony with natural law, you see, then free will comes about more and more fully and lives more and more in harmony with nature. And so where all the billiard balls precipitate out is in a place that's more and more in harmony with nature. So God's will comes in two forms: predetermination, God's will. Karma is God's will. But there's also free will. And as we evolve, then we cease to come from this place, Adrian, like you're saying, of oblivion, where it's just we're identified with their perspective and we just keep rolling along with that billiard ball, and that's what we think the world is, and that's who we think we are. See, just because you feel free doesn't mean you are free. That can be part of the predetermined component. It's interesting in Asia, you know, there's tends to be, I know in Vietnam, people I've talked to, there's a tendency to attribute almost everything to karma. We have no free will, it's all karma. And so I have a friend, Sanjay Rad, in India who teaches in Asia, and he says he teaches the people there that you have a lot more free will than you think you'd have. Americans are kind of the opposite. Westerners are kind of the opposite. They think they have free will and they can overcome whatever karma there is out there. And so in the West, we tend to teach, real spiritual teachers tend to teach, or at least should, that you have a lot less free will than you think. There's a lot more karma, you see. And so really it's the interface and the dance between karma and free will. Are you a martial artist, and based on what karmic things are happening, you deal with it, not just the outer world, but the inner karma, the inner world? Novak Djokovic. How do you deal with the karma, not just the outside? Most of your karma is between your ears and in your heart. How you feel, what you think. And how do we work with that? So when we talk about our relationship with government, when we talk about our relationship with anything and everything, our transference, a lot of that is so karmic. It's predominantly karmic. And our free will has to do a lot with more how we deal then with that karma and how we manage our lives, coming from a place of deeper wisdom, a place of free will. And it's a matter of evolution. And there are technologies, ancient technologies that can facilitate. Why do you think they call it spiritual emancipation? Why do you think they call it spiritual liberation? It's not because you go to church on Sunday, oh, I feel liberated. No. It's much deeper than that. That's karmic, really. I mean, predominantly. But there are greater degrees of liberation. There's a greater, deeper meaning to liberation. I don't mean to completely poo-poo the whole thing about feeling liberated at church on Sunday, but there are deeper meanings to it, is what I'm saying, deeper levels of it, and they are attainable. And that's what Mount Soma is all about. And if people understood that, okay, I get it. They heard this talk. Okay, I get what he's saying. Yeah, okay, fine. Put it in a shoebox and stick it in the back closet. Now I know what this guy's talking about. But there's another thing to find the truth of it deep within your life, enough to dedicate yourself to it, to live in accord with it. And here I go again, but there's so many billionaires out there that could bankroll the completion of Mount Soma and not even feel it. But that's why, because they get it as an intellectual notion, but they haven't really found the truth of it within themselves yet. And that makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. All right. Anything else, you guys? Scott, Adrian?
No.
Anything, Adrian?
I don't. I don't. I'm not seeing anything. I think we're good.
Yeah. All right. So until next week, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.